You're listening to the Move IQ podcast, and I'm your host, Phil Spencer, and I'm delighted to be joined again in Season 2 by my friend and co-host, Chris Ducker. This is the place where I'll be sharing my advice, my experience, and lots of tips and tricks on all things property and moving home generally. In this season, we're going to be talking about renting and giving you advice on how to navigate the rental market. So I'm really pleased to be here and I appreciate your time. So without further ado, let's get cracking. Your rented property is more than just the place you live, it's your home. Taking out Legal & General's rental protection plan could help you pay the rent on your home when you can't. Visit legalandgeneral.com/rental protection plan to find out more.
Hello everybody and welcome back to episode 2 of season 2 of the Move IQ property podcast with myself, Chris Ducker, and my co-host Phil. Don't look at me funny, Spencer. How are you, my man?
I'm very good, thank you, Chris, indeed.
We were just talking before we hit the record button here. 20 years for yourself in the broadcasting game.
Yes.
I'm sure the hardcore Phil fans would love this.
Well, I started helping people find homes about 25, 26 years ago.
Wow.
And Kirsty and I started on Location in 2000. Yeah.
Does it become, I'm really curious, all the time we spent with each other, I've never asked this question, does it become a real mouthful in general conversation to say location? Because I noticed you cut it at 2 locations just then. Or is it just known between the two of you and producers and friends as just location? Is that the way it is?
I think location. Actually, I'll probably stop at 2. But interestingly, so we're currently making our 5th series of Love It or List It.
Love that show, by the way.
And I think, thank you, we love making it. It feels really relevant and topical to where people are now. Not that location doesn't, but it's a very natural conversation to every house owner to have. Should we love it and invest more money in our house to make it work better, or should we actually, is it time to move on?
You know what I love about it? It's real. Like, you see a lot of these shows where, a crew will come in and kind of completely refurb something on an apparent budget of 10 grand or something. And you look at it and you say, they've spent way more than that.
Yes.
It's real. And that's what I like about it. Okay. But that's not why we're here today. Although
it's quite fun chatting about it all the same.
But thank you for indulging me. Okay. So now we're going to deep dive here in episode 2, things that we need to consider when choosing a rental property.
Yeah.
So what are the key things that we need to be considering here from the outset?
Well, much as the same as when you're choosing a property to buy. Obviously, there's a bit more flexibility involved, but it is your home. It might not be a long-term home or a permanent home, but many of the same factors still apply. To coin the phrase, location. Yeah. Is it where you want to be and are happy to be? What's the condition of it like? Is it being well looked after? And then the practical needs of your commute and the amenities and the schools and the price and the size and all those things. And the nuisances as well. Are the neighbours noisy? Is there a road behind it? Is there...
Are you next to a train track?
All of
the
that.
rest of it? Right.
All of that.
Oh, well, so let me ask you this. The average rental agreement term.
Yeah.
When I was renting many moons ago now, we're talking 90s, right? But when I was 90s and 2000s, I always I never liked the idea of signing anything more than a year.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to be locked in for anything like
Yeah.
that. Knowing full well that it might cost me a little more over a longer period of time if I stayed in the same location, because the landlord could obviously end up increasing the cost at the end of the current agreement period. What is the standard now, 2019 and beyond? Where are we at?
The standard now, the majority of tenants in the UK at the moment do so under an assured short hold tenancy, an AST.
Which means what exactly?
It is a 12-month period.
12 months.
It can have a break clause after 6 months, but the standard is 12 months. Personally, I think that we will shortly see much longer leases, and I think that's a good idea. And there are pros and cons to that for both landlord and for tenant, and Chris, you've just given me an idea for a podcast. So why don't we? Because that is a really relevant and topical idea, and it's perhaps one for the future. But
so we'll dive in. Okay,
Yeah.
so let me ask you this, and as we follow up, let's say you found a place, you've looked around it, and you feel good about it. It's in a good location, all the rest of it. Does it really matter who the landlord is? Do we need to be concerned over this, or spend any more time thinking about it?
I don't think you need to be concerned, but I do feel that you need to be aware. Indeed, you have a right as a tenant to know who your landlord is. And the fact that they live in the UK or internationally is also a right for you to have the answer to that. I feel it is relevant to knowing whether you are dealing with a portfolio landlord, a landlord who is in business to rent properties or has many of them, or an individual landlord who this might be a one-off. There are lots of what they call accidental landlords around at the moment.
Now, what does that mean?
An accidental landlord is likely to be someone who lived in the property themselves as their own home and couldn't sell it, so kept on to it and moved out and bought something else or rented something else.
Right.
There are pros and cons to each. I think a kind of portfolio or more professional landlord, it's not going to feel as homely. The fact of the matter is, if the landlord has lived in it as their main home, it's likely to feel more homely.
Right.
It's probably likely to be better looked after.
But if someone's got a portfolio of properties, let's say 10, 15, 20 properties, obviously they've got their maintenance guy, they've got their project management guy. Surely that kind of property is going to be slightly better maintained. You know that there's a plumber on call if you need it, that sort of type of thing.
That's why it's important to have an understanding of what you're dealing with. I don't think it really matters. But if it's an occasional landlord, you might not be able to get hold of him.
Yeah.
He might be on holiday. He might not have any support networks. He might not have done this before. He might not know the legalities. And the legislation has changed a lot over the last few years. So I think it's relevant to know who you're dealing with.
Okay. All right. So let's look at the property itself a little bit further. I think the big thing is, obviously, almost everyone I feel that is looking to rent a property is most likely to not have that much stuff, right? In terms of, large pieces of furniture, beds, sofas, dining tables, chairs, all that kind of stuff. What's the difference? I mean, except for the obvious difference between unfurnished and furnished. Yeah. And then you've got the good old-fashioned semi-furnished, which can be anything from a fridge to, a bed and a fridge. What's the difference between these two or three different modes?
An unfurnished property includes a fridge and a cooker. It includes curtains or blinds over the windows. There will be a basic kitchen and basic bathroom fixtures. So there won't be furniture, there won't be any freestanding storage, there won't be cutlery and bits and pieces like that. Whereas a furnished property includes all of those things together with a washing machine, freezer, sofas, chairs, bed, wardrobe, dining table and chairs.
So everything you need to kind of just move in and get comfortable pretty much straight away.
I think there are advantages. Obviously, an advantage of being furnished is convenience. You can sign the lease and move straight in, unpack and kind of get back to work or to your life. And I guess a degree of cost saving because you haven't got to go out and buy anything. But it's likely still to be pretty basic. There tends to be less furnished properties on the market than unfurnished.
Why is that?
I think the majority of tenants have stuff now. I mean, obviously, if you're a student or you're really just starting out in life, you don't have furniture, or if you're on a short-term contract, you don't want to be buying furniture. But actually, as people go through life, they tend to accumulate stuff.
Yeah, that's fair enough, yeah. What happens if you're in a fully furnished property and you don't like the sofa, for example? How do you... I mean, you've really only got two options. You either tell the landlord you want it replaced and you want them to replace it, or you go out and buy one yourself and then ask the landlord to come collect. I mean, how would one
it's a very good
deal
question.
with that?
Both of those are quite delicate. And I guess that is an advantage of renting somewhere that is unfurnished because you can put your personal stamp and
Right.
your things in it.
Right.
But if you don't like the landlord's sofa, is the landlord going to come and take it away? You know, you've agreed the rent. You're in there. Can he be bothered or she be bothered to come and take it away and put it in storage? Probably not. So you're likely to be stuck with it unless you put it in storage.
Right.
And then go and buy your one. It's not an ideal scenario.
No.
I guess the way of dealing with it is upfront, before you sign on the lease, saying, look, sorry, but I don't like your sofa, or
Of course.
Can you take that? And I'll take the property at the price agreed without the sofa.
Yeah. I remember many years ago when I rented one of my first properties, it just looked a little aged. The painting, the fixtures, a few fixtures and nothing crazy, but nothing that a lick of paint and a few new doorknobs wasn't going to fix pretty quickly. And I negotiated that into the term of the agreement.
Okay.
And he said, give me 10 days, I'll take care of it all. And he said, what colour do you want the walls? He even asked me,
That's
what
great.
colour do you want?
He must have loved you as a tenant.
Yes,
Chris.
I was the perfect tenant.
Well, because you turned up, fully dressed and ready to go.
Let's wrap this one up here with a final kind of question here. I've been looking forward to this one. I think the world has changed a lot over the last 10 to 15 years. Social media particularly has played a major role in the way that we find things, sell things, share things, talk about things, the whole kit and caboodle, right? When it comes to renting a property, is it better off to go via a letting agent, or how do you personally feel about seeing something on a Facebook page or a Facebook group, for example, or somebody advertising on Twitter or something like? Yeah. What are the pros and cons there?
Advantages of using a letting agent, well they'll be experienced in what they're doing, and they should understand property law. And that is actually really quite crucial. Legislation has changed a lot, as we've talked about. So they are... A letting agent's far more likely to ensure that all the legal requirements are met, both by landlord and by tenant. They're going to have an office. They're going to be open every day. There's members of staff and support staff. So if something needs fixing, the chances are...
The phone's going to be answered.
The phone's going to be answered.
Yeah.
And actually, as a tenant, you're not the pain in the bum that's then ringing the landlord 20 times saying, my boiler needs fixing. You make one call to the office that's open, and then they have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So there are definitely advantages to the tenant if the landlord is using a letting agent.
Right.
On the flip side, I think the advantages of renting via a private landlord, because you found it across social media, that kind of thing.
I've even seen it back in the day. The little postcards in the newsagent window, all that sort of type of thing.
I don't think you should talk about that, Chris.
Not those kind of postcards, Phil Spencer. You know what I mean? But this still happens today, though.
Yes.
Right. Particularly things like spare room for let and all that sort of type of stuff.
Yeah. What I would say is that meeting the landlord can actually really benefit you as a tenant, because if you're able to develop a relationship, there's mutual benefit both sides. If you know the landlord and you get on well, then there's a far greater chance that they will go the extra mile for you if you want the walls changed, or if you want to stay longer, or if you don't want the sofa, or whatever it may be. If you've got a relationship with that person and there's a degree of sort of mutual understanding and respect, that can only be a good thing as a tenant.
Well, a great way to wrap up our second episode here in season number 2 of the Move IQ Property Podcast. Episode 1 was all about how to actually approach renting a home. Obviously, this episode, we've been talking about the things you need to consider when purchasing, or rather choosing a rental property. And in the next episode, we're going to be deep diving on how you can actually secure that rental property. A lot of people don't even realise you can negotiate the terms, and we're going to be going into that and a whole lot more.
It's a competitive marketplace out there in the world, but actually there's a lot you can do as a tenant to help yourself secure.
It's good stuff. We'll see you in episode 3, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Hope you found it helpful. That wraps up this episode of Move IQ's Property Podcast. Whatever podcast app you like to use, please do go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I'd also really appreciate it if you could leave us a review. Reviews massively help other people like you to find us. For free supporting materials, head over to our website, moveiq.co.uk. And thanks again for tuning in.